I recently attended a dinner with a prominent cultural critic, a man who has built his entire reputation on defending traditional hierarchies.
Right.
He was articulate, charming, and just utterly convinced that Western civilization is collapsing because we've lost our fear of authority.
Familiar argument.
He spoke about the church not as a vessel for love, but as a necessary leash for human nature. To him, the average person was a dangerous animal that required a cage for its own good.
For its own good, of course.
And he argued that removing these external constraints was the root of all modern misery. We started talking about the Gnostic Gospels, specifically the idea of finding God directly within oneself, without a priest, without a mediator, and, without shame. The change in him was visceral. I mean, the charm just evaporated instantly. He didn't just disagree. He became visibly agitated, almost panicky. He snapped at me. That isn't theology. That's anarchy. If you tell people God is inside them, they'll think every dark impulse they have is holy. In that moment, the intellectual mask just slipped. I realized he wasn't protecting civilization from chaos. He was protecting himself from the terrifying burden of his own autonomy. He sounded exactly like Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, a man who believes that freedom is too heavy a weight for the human soul to bear.
And that the only way to save humanity is to enslave it.
Authority. He didn't want people to be good. He wanted them to be compliant. And deep down, his fear revealed the exact mechanism of control we are going to deconstruct today.
The conspiracy to keep you from integrating your own shadow. It is a striking opening because it captures the exact psychological tension that I think defines our institutions. We aren't just talking about a dinner party disagreement or some, dusty theology. We are talking about the architecture of suppression. That critic's panic, that immediate slide into fear, is the sound of a worldview being threatened by the possibility of human wholeness.
He isn't afraid of heresy.
No, he is afraid of the ungovernable nature of the integrated soul.
We are going to look at this mechanism of control, how it was built, how it operates today in our digital and our physical worlds, and, well, what happens when we try to dismantle it.
And we've got a lot to work with. The theoretical framework is coming from this essay, The Sacred Flesh, but we're also pulling in Robert Tulip's analysis of Carl Jung's Aeon.
Which takes us into the astrology of history.
And then we have some political science from Alexander Kustov on state capacity, and even the work of the theologian Cyril Origen to give us that counter-argument.
We're going to weave all these together to understand why integration, becoming a whole person who accepts both their light and their dark sides, is treated as a threat to the status quo.
Because the thesis here, really, is that the critic wasn't protecting civilization from chaos. He was protecting a specific management strategy that relies on you being fragmented.
Okay, let's start with that management strategy. The Sacred Flesh argues that the empire, and by that it means the systems of control that govern Western life, it never really fell. It just pivoted.
It pivoted. It moved from a strategy of, let's say, physical coercion to one of psychological management.
And to really get that, you have to look at the logistics of the Roman Empire at its height.
Absolutely. Maintaining control through military force is just incredibly expensive. And you have to pay the legions, you have to feed them, you have to build garrisons in every village from Britannia all the way to Syria. If you rely on the sword to keep people in line, you're constantly bleeding resources. It's financially and logically unsustainable. You eventually run out of silver, or you run out of loyal soldiers.
So the pivot is Constantine.
Exactly. Constantine's genius wasn't necessarily his piety, though he may have been pious. It was his administrative insight. It was a business decision almost.
A business decision.
Well, he realized that you don't need to conquer bodies if you can conquer souls. If you can get people to police themselves through a shared belief system, you don't need a centurion on every street corner.
You manufacture consent.
You manufacture consent. You create a system where the policing happens inside the subject's head before they even think about acting out.
The essay, The Sacred Flesh, it calls this a monopoly on meaning-making.
Right. The institution, the church back then, but maybe the state or the corporation today, it positions itself as the only source of validation, of safety, of truth.
But to make that monopoly work, to make people buy what you are selling, you have to create a demand.
You have to make the population feel incomplete. You have to fragment them so that they look at themselves and see something broken, something sinful, something that only the institution can fix.
Which helps explain why the Gnostic Gospels were such an existential threat. I've always been fascinated by the texts that, didn't make the cut. The ones burned or buried in the Egyptian desert.
Well, it wasn't just that they were weird.
Oh.
It was that they offered a competing product. And not just a competing product, they offered a way to bypass the market entirely. Let's look at the Gospel of Thomas, specifically, saying 22. It says, when you make the two into one, and when you make the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner, then you will enter the kingdom.
Make the two into one. I mean, that is the direct opposite of the fragmentation we were just talking about.
The Gnostic claim is revolutionary. It's that the kingdom of God is not some place you go after you die. And it's certainly not a reward that a priest hands out for good behavior.
It's a state of consciousness.
A state of consciousness available right now through direct experience or Gnosis. If you can access the divine directly by integrating your internal opposites, your light and your dark, your inner and your outer, you don't need a mediator.
The hierarchy becomes obsolete.
It becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
And for an institution that is built on being the necessary bridge between man and God, irrelevance is a death sentence.
So that explains the panic.
That is why your dinner companion was so panicked. If people realize they are autonomous spiritual beings, the empire loses its leverage. It loses its customer base.
So the suppression of these texts, it wasn't about doctrinal purity. It was a structural necessity for the empire's survival.
Absolutely. But Jung's analysis in aeons suggests this had a massive psychological cost, a cost we are still paying.
What's the cost?
He argues that by suppressing these ideas, Christianity created a sterilized version of Christ.
Sterilized?
And it's the perfect word. In Orthodox theology, Christ is depicted as all light, all good, all perfection. He is entirely separated from what Jung would call the shadow.
But Jungian psychology teaches us that the psyche is a system of opposites, right? You can't have light without shadow.
So by stripping the God image of its shadow, the church created a psychology of repression. It created a fundamental split. Where does the shadow go if it isn't in God?
It gets cast out. It becomes the devil, or the flesh, or the heretic.
And it becomes a source of deep shame for the individual. The sacred flesh argues that this splits the human psyche right down the middle. Flesh versus spirit, reason versus passion.
If you believe your own body is a source of corruption, or that your anger is purely evil,
you are constantly in a state of internal war. You are fighting yourself. And a person fighting themselves is weak. They're exhaustible.
And crucially, they are governable.
They're governable because they look to the institution for absolution. Please, Father, forgive me for being human. Please protect me from my own impulses. The fragmented person needs the external authority to tell them they are okay.
Where's the integrated person?
The integrated person, the one who follows that Gnostic path, realizes that those shadow qualities, aggression, desire, the drive for power, the connection to the body, they aren't evil. They're just energy.
The vital life force.
The vital life force. If you integrate them, if you accept them as part of the whole, you stop fighting yourself. You become self-possessed. And as the sacred flesh states very clearly, integrated individuals are ungovernable.
And ungovernable doesn't mean they're, lawless criminals running around setting things on fire.
No, it means they possess internal authority. They don't rely on the external structure for their sense of self or their moral compass. They can't be manipulated by shame or the promise of validation. They're free.
Now, we need to bring this into the modern day. Because while we are talking about ancient theology, this exact mechanism is running right now in our offices, in our digital infrastructure.
It's the same software, different hardware.
Exactly. The church might have lost some of its power, but the structure of suppression has just migrated to the corporation.
Parallel.
I want to share a story that illustrates this perfectly. This comes from a forum for Silicon Valley veterans. On the surface, it's not about theology at all, but just listen to the dynamic here. I recently came across a thread on a niche forum for Silicon Valley veterans that struck a chord. The poster, let's call him Elias, was a senior architect at one of those monolith tech giants, the modern equivalent of the cathedral.
The cathedral.
He described a phantom limb syndrome among his team. They were the elite, the chosen ones, paid to build the digital infrastructure of the future. Yet, Elias noted this peculiar paralysis.
They have all the resources, but nothing is happening.
He described a meeting where a junior engineer proposed a radical, chaotic compression algorithm. It mimicked biological asymmetry, something raw and intuitive.
The Gnostic impulse.
The management, acting remarkably like the Grand Inquisitor, didn't fire the kid. They just guided him back to safety. They smoothed out his rough edges, forcing his code into compliant, sterilized libraries that were safe and industry standard.
Safe, sterilized libraries. You can almost hear the echo of the sterilized Christ.
It's the exact same pattern. The junior engineer is the Gnostic. He has a direct, intuitive connection to the reality of the code, to the logos, you might say.
He's not relying on the rule book.
No, he's relying on direct perception of the pattern.
And the management is the priesthood. They aren't interested in the truth of the code or its potential brilliance. They are interested in safety, compliance, and standardization.
They treat the raw, chaotic creativity as a form of heresy.
A heresy that needs to be brought back into the fold of the industry standard. It's about control, not creation.
And Elias writes that the result of this suppression was spiritual deadness.
Powerful.
Yeah, the company is profitable, the stock options are vesting, but the actual capacity to do anything new has died. They're just maintaining the illusion of progress.
This is the trade-off the Grand Inquisitor offers, isn't it? We will save you from the anxiety of creation. We will save you from the chaos of the unknown. Just use the approved library.
It prevents crashes. It prevents the system from breaking.
But in the long term, it creates what Elias calls civilizational decadence. We forget how to build new things because we are so afraid of the sin of deviation.
In the tech world, that gnosis is the direct connection. It's often destructive to the old code.
Innovation is inherently aggressive. It destroys the old way to build the new way. If you have suppressed the shadow, the aggression, the chaos, the asymmetry, you cannot innovate.
You can only iterate.
You can only polish the existing statue. You cannot carve a new one. Your capacity is capped.
Which leads us to the broader societal level. We've looked at the individual soul, the corporate team, but what about the state itself? This is where that research from Kustoff and Pardelli, Beyond Diversity, comes in. It's about state capacity and social cohesion.
This is a critical piece of the puzzle. The standard argument in political science, the one often associated with Robert Putnam, is that diversity erodes social trust. More diversity, less cohesion.
But Kustoff and Pardelli argue that this isn't inevitable.
Oh, they suggest that high state capacity, meaning a strong, efficient government that enforces laws and provides services reliably, can actually create social cohesion even in very diverse populations.
It sounds like a solution. Build a better state, get a more cohesive society.
It sounds excellent.
Yeah.
But we have to look at how that cohesion is achieved. When we look at this through the lens of suppression we've been developing, state capacity starts to look less like a service provider and more like a filter. To create a cohesive population that is easy to govern, the state effectively has to smooth out the rough edges of human nature. It has to filter out the outliers.
It has to suppress the Marcus types.
Exactly. I think you have the story with the European grid crisis.
This comes from a contact in urban planning, and it's just a chilling look at what cohesion actually costs. I was speaking with a contact who works in high-level urban planning in a major European capital. She told me about a crisis meeting regarding a failing energy grid. The room was filled with what she called perfect bureaucrats, people who had completely successfully repressed their shadows.
Oh, I know these people.
They were polite, agreeable, and utterly incapable of making a hard decision. Then there was Marcus.
Yeah.
Marcus was described as ungovernable. He was abrasive, trusted his gut over the consensus models, and had a personal life that was rumored to be intense and unconventional. He refused to apologize for his desires or his aggression.
In Jungian terms, he was integrated. He had access to his shadow.
My contact watched as the institution systematically isolated him. Marcus had the solution to the grid failure, but it required risky, decisive action that upset the manufactured consent of the committee.
He was rocking the boat.
They eventually pushed him out for cultural misalignment. The grid issues persisted, costing millions, but the cohesion of the office was preserved.
The cohesion of the office was preserved. That sentence, that should haunt us.
It's the ultimate victory of the Grand Inquisitor, isn't it? They prioritized the comfort of the group, the politeness of the interaction over the actual reality of the physical infrastructure. The lights are flickering, but at least we're all getting along.
And look at the character of Marcus. He is described as ungovernable. He's abrasive. He has access to his aggression. In a crisis, when the lights are actually going out, you need a Marcus.
You do.
You need someone who can cut through the red tape, ignore the polite consensus, and force a solution into existence.
Yeah.
You need a shadow.
But the high-capacity state, the one designed for stability and cohesion, it views Marcus as a pathogen.
He is a virus in the system of manufactured consent. The system is designed to run on pleasant mediocrity on people who follow the rules and don't make waves. So it purges the competent individual because his competence is disruptive.
So this flips Kustav's argument on its head, or at least shows the dark side of it. High-state capacity might create cohesion, but it does so by, what, lobotomizing the collective intelligence.
It removes the very people capable of solving existential threats. It creates a profound fragility.
The system works beautifully as long as nothing goes wrong.
Exactly. But the moment reality intrudes, the moment the grid fails or the supply chain breaks, the system collapses because it has exiled the only people strong enough to fix it.
Talking about the grid failing brings us to what might be the most tangible consequence of all this suppression: the decline of the physical world.
Right.
We aren't just losing innovative code or bureaucratic efficiency, we are losing the ability to build things in reality. The sacred flesh argues that the theological suppression of the body has morphed into a kind of secular fear of matter itself.
Early Christianity had a very tense relationship with the body. While the core doctrine said Christ came in the flesh, the practice was often about subduing the flesh, punishing it, escaping it. It was seen as the source of sin. Today, that has secularized into a class of elites who live entirely in the abstract. They live in models, in spreadsheets, in the cloud. They are terrified of the physical world.
The physical world is messy, it's heavy, it resists you, it doesn't behave like a line of code.
And it is shadowy. It involves friction, heat, danger, things that can hurt you. If you have psychologically split yourself off from your own body, from your own physicality, you will inevitably be alienated from the physical world around you.
I have a report here from the Rust Belt that describes this alienation in painful detail.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a scenario described in a series of field reports I read from a heavy industry project manager in the Rust Belt. He was comparing two eras of manufacturing. He spoke of the old guardmen who were physically connected to the material, who understood the violence of steel and heat.
The violence of it. Interesting.
They had an embodied knowledge, a connection to the physical world that wasn't filtered through safety seminars or liability waivers. They were often rough, possessing a vital life force that modern HR departments would find terrifying.
They'd be seen as liabilities today, like Marcus.
Exactly. Now, he wrote, "The floor is run by engineers who live entirely in the abstract. They view the physical world as dirty, something to be managed from behind glass."
The separation.
He detailed a specific incident where a new patent for a propulsion system failed to convert to production. And the reason why? Because the designers were psychologically fragmented. They feared the physical testing phase. They treated the machinery as an intellectual concept rather than a dangerous physical reality.
They were afraid to get their hands dirty. Literally.
They suppressed the shadow of the work, the danger, the heat, the noise. The result wasn't just a delay. It was a complete inability to manifest the idea into matter. The infrastructure crumbled not because of a lack of funding, but because the psychological fortitude to deal with reality had been bred out of the workforce.
Perfect blueprints, but no bridges. This is the endpoint of the Gnostic rejection of matter, fully realized in secular industry. It's a spiritual problem with the physical manifestation.
It's striking that he uses the word violence regarding the steel and heat. Usually we are trained to hear violence as a moral failing. But in physics, in manufacturing, violence is just energy, it's force, it's what's required to change the state of things.
Exactly. This goes right back to the integration of the shadow. The shadow contains that vital life force. Aggression, heat, friction, these are properties of matter. If you are psychologically split, if you identify only with the spirit, which is the blueprint, the safety regulation, the clean theory,
and you repress the flesh, which is the danger, the noise, the heat,
then you literally cannot engage with the world. You cannot manifest ideas into matter.
You can design the propulsion system, but you can't build it because you are afraid to touch the machine.
And this isn't just an industrial problem. It's a civilizational symptom. We're retreating into the safety of the virtual, the digital pleroma, if you will, because the physical world is too heavy, too dangerous, and too shadowy for our fragmented psyches to handle.
We're becoming ghosts in our own machines. So we have a civilization that suppresses the shadow to maintain control, which leads to spiritual stagnation in tech, fragility in the state, and, well, impotence in industry. The question is, why is this happening now? Is this just bad management, or is there a bigger cycle at play here?
This is where we have to step back and look at the macro view. Robert Tulip's analysis of Jung's aeon provides a cosmological framework for this. He argues we're in the middle of a massive shift between two eons.
We're talking about the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius. Now, for the listener who hears Age of Aquarius and immediately thinks of, a 60s musical, Jung took this very seriously as a psychological map, didn't he?
Seriously. He wasn't talking about horoscopes in the newspaper. He was talking about the precession of the equinoxes as a kind of grand clock for the evolution of the collective unconscious.
And each age lasts, about 2,000 years?
And each one brings with it a specific dominant archetype, a way of seeing the world.
So what was the Age of Pisces?
The Age of Pisces is symbolized specifically two fish swimming in opposite directions. This is the Christian eon. The central theme of Pisces is duality.
The split. The split we've been talking about this whole time.
Exactly. Christ versus Antichrist. Spirit versus matter. Good versus evil. This has been the operating system of the West for 2 millennia.
It's the era of the Grand Inquisitor.
It's defined by vertical authority, by belief, and by dogmatic submission. You look up to the institution to mediate between the opposites for you.
And we are leaving that age.
We are transitioning into the Age of Aquarius. The symbol is the water bearer, a human figure. Jung interpreted this as the age of the anthropos, the complete human.
And psychologically, it represents a shift from belief to
knowledge, or Gnosis, direct experience.
And the structure changes from duality to integration.
The water bearer pours the water of knowledge for everyone. It is horizontal, not vertical. But the crucial demand of Aquarius is the union of opposites. It demands that we integrate the shadow that the Age of Pisces worked so hard to suppress and cast out.
Jung was not optimistic about this transition, was he? He didn't see it as some peaceful, easy dawning.
No, he was terrified of it. He saw the de-Christianization of the world not just as people stopping going to church, but as the loss of the psychological container that held the psyche together for centuries.
What was the danger?
He warned that if we don't integrate the shadow consciously, as individuals, it will manifest unconsciously as mass psychoses.
Like the totalitarian movements of the 20th century.
Precisely. Nazism, communism. These were attempts to create a new man without integrating the shadow. They simply projected the shadow onto an external enemy, the Jew, the bourgeoisie, and then tried to exterminate it.
That's the danger of the transition. When the old gods die, the demons break loose.
If we don't do the work individually, we act it out collectively with horrific consequences.
So the panic of the critic at the dinner party, that fear of anarchy, is actually the friction of this cosmic shift. The old Piscean structure is dying, and it is clinging to power.
And the new Aquarian structure, direct experience, integration, wholeness, is trying to be born. But to the old guard, wholeness looks like chaos.
So if the task of our age is integration, how do we actually do it? I mean, if the institutions are designed to stop us, where do we even look? The sacred flesh points to some heretical solutions.
It argues we have to reclaim the shadow, not as evil, but as vitality. We have to reframe the very concept of sin.
So aggression becomes assertion.
Yes.
And desire becomes life force.
Exactly. The shadow is the battery pack. It's the engine. One of the specific areas the essay analyzes, and this is impartial anthropological analysis, is the world of kink and BDSM.
Right. This is a sensitive topic, but the analysis is fascinating. It reframes BDSM not as a simple fetish, but as a kind of ritual practice for people who are starving for embodied experience.
The key distinction the sacred flesh makes is between institutional domination and consensual power exchange.
Okay.
Institutional domination, like the relationship between the state and the citizen, or the corporation and the employee, offers no exit. You submit, but there is no safe word. It is, by its nature, extractive.
Whereas in a conscious power exchange,
it is bounded. It is consensual. And paradoxically, by choosing to surrender control within a safe, defined container, the participant can enter what is called subspace, a state of ego dissolution.
The essay argues this is a spiritual experience.
It's a way to touch the transcendent through the intense sensations of the body.
The body, under stress, can be a vehicle for transcendence. It reminds me of the old ascetics, but completely flipped on its head.
Instead of denying the body to find God, you dive into the body. It is embodied spirituality. It reveals that the drives we are told to suppress, the drive to dominate, the drive to surrender, are actually pathways to wholeness if they are handled consciously and with consent.
The essay also points to the rise of neo-paganism and the archetype of the witch.
Again, look at the sociology of it. Why is the figure of the witch so popular right now? Because she represents the integrated individual. She works with nature. She understands the shadow side of biology, death, decay, birth. And critically, she doesn't need a priest.
She has her own gnosis, her own direct connection.
She does. However, We have to address the counter-argument here. Yeah. We mentioned Cyril O'Regan earlier. He warns that this Gnostic return is a haunted narrative. O'Regan's critique is vital. He argues that these modern Gnostic movements are actually parasitic on Christianity. They take the Christian structure, salvation, divinity, and they just invert it. They make the self into God.
And he sees that as dangerous.
He warns that this leads to a dangerous inflation of the ego.
If I decide I am God, then I make all the rules. It leads to hubris.
Exactly. O'Regan would argue that the Grand Inquisitor might be cynical, but the alternative, a society of people who all believe they are divine and answerable to no one, is absolute chaos. It is the very anarchy your dinner critic feared.
And the sacred flesh would counter that.
It would counter that integration isn't about becoming a tyrant. It's about becoming responsible. When you withdraw your projections, when you realize your shadow is yours, not your neighbor's or your enemy's, you stop blaming the world for your problems.
You carry your own weight.
You carry your own weight. It is the opposite of hubris. It is the acceptance of the heavy burden of consciousness.
So we are left with a choice. The essay outlines 3 paths for us.
Path 1 is submission. You accept the fragmentation, you take the blue pill, you stay in the sterilized library, you keep the office cohesion, you suppress your shadow. It's safe. It's what the Grand Inquisitor offers you.
Path 2 is rebellion.
You fight the system. But the essay argues this is a trap. If you define yourself solely by fighting the system, you are still bound to it. You are just its negative image. And usually you burn out or become a martyr. It's another dead end.
And path 3 is integration.
This is the hard path. This is the Gnostic path. You become whole despite the resistance.
Yeah.
You acknowledge your shadow, you reclaim your authority, and you develop a direct connection to meaning. You become ungovernable in the sense that you are self-governing.
But as we've seen with the early Gnostics and with Marcus in the planning office, institutions punish integration.
It is a dangerous path. You cannot unknow the fragmentation once you see it, but living as a whole person in a broken world is a lonely and difficult task.
Jung called for a Gnostic reformation. He didn't want to burn down the church. He wanted to build on to the house.
He wanted to make the house roomier, to reconcile faith with reason, spirit with matter, to allow the whole human personality to exist within the culture. That is the great task of the Age of Aquarius.
I want to end where we began, with that final scene of Dostoevsky's The Grand Inquisitor.
Okay.
After the old man has laid out his entire devastating argument that humanity is weak, that they crave slavery, that freedom is a curse, Christ does not say a single word. Okay. He does not debate. He does not offer a counter-argument. He simply stands up, walks over to the Inquisitor, and kisses him gently on his bloodless lips.
It is the ultimate act of integration. It is compassion without judgment. Christ sees that the Inquisitor is trapped in his own system of control. He recognizes the fear that built the prison.
And then he walks away. He doesn't burn the prison down. He doesn't start a revolution. He just leaves.
And that is the silence we are left with. The recognition that the walls of the prison, the safety, the compliance, the fear of the shadow are built by us and can only be transcended by an act of radical, integrated love.
Today, from that dinner party to the Roman Empire, from the server rooms of Silicon Valley to the Rust Belt, and finally to the stars themselves, the architecture of suppression is vast, but the door is, and always has been, unlocked.
It just requires the courage to walk through it.
We'll see you on the other side.